When you're building a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, there's no reason to have a central conflict. Every adventure and every encounter is isolated from one another and nothing needs to blend together. That's about as far away from the games that we play today as possible. What we're talking about is campaign building, how to have an overarching theme. So, let's talk about it. So today we're going to talk about 5 specific ways to craft a central theme when building a campaign. Because a lot of times when we have a campaign and we want to homebrew our world, what we have to think of is what's the driving force in this world, this campaign, for this group of adventurers. So let's talk about 5 things that can help inspire us that aren't end-all be-alls that we should consider when crafting a central conflict or central idea of our campaign. The first thing you have to do when actually crafting a central theme or central conflict is identifying the main threat. What does that mean? A main threat is a threat that actually is going to affect everyone in the world. It doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all of the world. It doesn't mean it's a hell landscape, but there's a singular threat, a singular force, faction that is actually going to cause a change in the environment for better or for worse, depending on what player's side is. Now, the thing is that you could say that you have the Church of Purity, and their job is to rid the world of demons. But in turn, they're ridding the world of sin too, and they're killing anyone that sins if they don't follow the strict guidelines of purity. All of a sudden, something that was good becomes something that's very strict, something that's causing strict rules and guidelines, where towns that actually follow the purity have curfews and have ways of functioning and mannerisms you have to follow, and certain races are not allowed, like tieflings, because you're part of the demons. This all of a sudden goes too far. A central threat doesn't have to be a threat that's overwhelming and overlooming like a demon lord. It can be something that actually means well. A central threat idea is the overarching thing that's occurring that the players will see on the sidelines and may not interact with directly. Usually the plot's going to follow that, but the central theme, the central conflict, is coming from something that they're not going to directly influence. But maybe the players decide to. Maybe the pressure of the Church of Purity becomes so great the players can't do it and they have to find out how to put an end to it. And it changes the path of where the players go. A centralized threat is an overarching campaign looming threat that the players may or may not interact with. That's the key. When the players choose to focus on it, that's when you know your hook worked. Another thing you can do when crafting a central conflict is link a backstory to that central conflict. Now, in the previous example, I talked about a Church of Purity that is pushing things forward and trying to purify all sin. Linking a backstory to this would be, imagine if you had a fighter that became a soldier and when he came back home, his parents were actually strung up and murdered and actually burned at the stake because they were committing sins. What those sins were, now that's an entire story itself. Now the character directly opposes the Church of Purity because they killed his parents. This is a way to create conflict. Now, before you do that, you better make sure that that player is okay with this, because the moment you pit that player against the Church of Purity, all of a sudden you're creating a conflict the rest of the party is going to have to deal with as well. You don't ever want to drive your party apart with these central conflicts, but you want to make sure that everyone's on board with it. Now, this could be something that's in the backstory that the player has learned to deal with that happened 10 years ago, and that so when the Church of Purity shows up, they have an actual do not like them, but don't put a member of the Church of Purity in that party unless they are a rogue member, because then you're creating conflict within the party. But that backstory tied to your central theme and central conflict allows for you to have an engaging story with a character that has some teeth in the game. The third thing to do when creating a main central conflict in campaign building is dynamic conflict. So this is dynamic conflict means that as the game progresses, the conflict changes as well. Who's opposing the central theme faction? Who has control? Cities and places that were controlled are no longer controlled. Control that's occurring. The players leave a village, come back to the village, and the Church of Purity has moved in. Central conflict shows its dominance, shows its force onto the campaign setting so the players can actually see it. If a central conflict or central theme never shows up or never changes the landscape, if it's not dynamic, it has no bearing or no meaning on the players. A dynamic threat or dynamic conflict will change the boundaries and guidelines by which the players have to play by. Meaning, when the Church of Purity moves in, all of a sudden there are strict guidelines they have to do, otherwise they're going to get thrown out of town, banished, or possibly incarcerated or killed, because the Church of Purity operates a certain way. But then you have the Nature Society or the Druidic community that pushes the Church of Purity away because nature is full of chaos. right? They're diametrically opposed, but both looking for nature is supporting life. Church of Purity is supporting, pureness of nature. Question is, which one is right? Having that dynamic conflict where neither side necessarily may seem right or wrong allows for a very engaging campaign idea. At the same time, directly diametric oppositions also work very well. So if you have two forces that are diametrically opposed to one another, that also works, such as possibly peace and war. How do they work together? How does that conflict look? How do they actually go to war with one another? Think about it. The other thing you have to consider when dealing with crafting a central conflict is player agency, meaning the players have to be able to influence that central conflict. Now, it may not be on a grand scheme in the very beginning, but at least they get to choose sides. At least their actions make a difference. Church of Purity, that we've used in our previous example, moves in to take over a city, and the players actually help the opposing Thieves Guild and Merchants Guild to actually make the Church of Purity members look like they're sinners themselves, pushing themselves out because they lose all their leadership. Maybe there's a different solution to this, a different group or different faction the players choose to go against. Allowing the players' agency and actions to show a difference in the central conflict on a local, regional, or smaller individual level allows the players to make sure their agency is showing. So keep that in mind when you're actually building these central conflicts. The players have to be able to influence it in some way. Maybe not on the grand scheme in the very beginning, but maybe definitely on a local level or a smaller level that then the players become known for. Food for thought on that one. The fifth thing to do to create and kind of really involve a major central conflict when it comes to world building is allow subplots to intermingle with the outskirts of the central conflict. And so let me give you an example. I've been using the Church of Purity moves into a town, right? Well, maybe now there's a subplot that's about going and getting a magical item. And that magical item isn't directly for the Church of Purity, but then all of a sudden the players get to choose. Do we give this magical item to the Church of Purity, or do we give this demonic sword to the agents of chaos, right? That are trying to fight the Church of Purity, which we are against. We allow these subplots to slightly kind of teeter along the outskirts of these things. Or when a Church of Purity moves in, maybe the players are trying to get a different cult, a different religion out the Church of Purity directly opposes. It's not about the main conflict. It's not about the main plot line. It's not about the main big bad evil guy that the players are doing. But the main central conflict has created something that allows for a subplot to occur. So when the main central conflict moves in, maybe we have to evacuate a city before the demon lord pushes into the city. So we're evacuating and we're having small combats with roaming demons trying to get the people safe. Subplots are a wonderful way when they teeter on the main conflict. Because remember, the main conflict that's occurring in the overall campaign setting doesn't have to be what the players' goals are aligned with, but it does have to influence something. So allowing the players to have influence of that, allowing the players to have subplots that are influenced by what's happening around them makes the world feel more alive. Remember, your overarching campaign, your overarching conflict does not have to be the alignment of which the players are adventuring. Maybe the players are dungeon delving, loot stealing mofos, and they're having to deal with this thing that's on the side. Maybe they are do-gooders. Maybe they're for the side of purity that's actually ransacking cities and trying to demolish all sin. There's lots of different ways to deal with the major conflict. But if you take these small things to work around this major conflict, it makes it feel real. So guys, thank you for joining us. This were 5 tips on how to deal with actually creating a centralized conflict that gives your world depth, that makes it feel alive. And it has to do with how the players interact with that central concept. Only 1 tip was actually about the central conflict itself. Everything else is how your players influence, react, and deal with what that central conflict creates around them. The central conflict, which I've said 1,000 times now, is about the thing that's influencing the world. It's bigger than the players right now, but it's definitely there. The players, though, can influence it on smaller levels, local levels, or individual levels. So guys, thank you as always for joining us. Like, subscribe, hit that button, smash the notification bell so it dings when we post a video. And again, thank you so much for sharing this with other people and helping us grow the channel, and we'll see you next time, as always.